Welcome to the show, Ginger.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
This is my new show, The Unlicensed Therapist, and where we dive into trauma. Um, Now, where are you originally from?
Originally Billings, Montana.
Okay. Oh, that's right. Through Heather.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually
Okay.
work at our local treatment center.
Okay, yeah, Heather's awesome. She's been on both this show and my addiction show.
Oh, okay.
So I
Yeah.
know a little bit about Billings now. She was my first guest from Montana in general. And now I think you're the third person from Billings that have been on my show. Well, that I've talked to at least.
Okay.
Um,
Awesome.
yep. So I'm hitting the Billings, Montana scenery. um, Now, are you still out that way?
Yes, I am. I work here in Billings, but I live on the Crow Reservation, which is about 35 miles south. I live in Pryor, Montana.
Oh, okay. So, but you still you work at a treatment center, you said?
I actually just opened up my private practice. So
Doing what?
I am a mental health counselor and an addiction counselor specializing in diversity, equity, and inclusion and trauma, EMDR.
Okay, EMDR is amazing. Um,
Yeah.
that's kind of how you know, I started drinking at 11, and when I was 12, I started drinking alcoholically,
Yeah.
and I wasn't, drinking every single day, but I was drinking to escape. You know what I mean? It wasn't drinking for a reason, right?
Right.
And before EMDR, I always pinpointed my drinking to one person's death and being like, "Oh, I drank over that person dying because I didn't
Right.
know how to deal with grief and loss. So that's why I started drinking the way I did." When in
Yeah.
reality, after a lot of therapy, I realized that I was getting bullied a lot at that time in my life,
Yeah.
and my drinking was the solution to my problem of being bullied.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I wouldn't have gotten that far, because if you watch me on earlier on in my show, my first show, if you watch early episodes, you would hear me talk about one event that caused my drinking, when really it was a series of events, which I just now uncovering, 3.5 years later since starting my first show.
Right.
And I think therapy is an amazing thing, because without it, I just would have been blamed it on this one specific incident, as opposed to having an answer to why I started doing things the way that I started doing things. So I think EMDR is an amazing tool that people don't even. Can you explain what EMDR is for people that don't know what we're talking about?
So it is eye movement, desensitization, reprocessing. So essentially, what you're utilizing is by stimulating bilateral stimulation. Some people desensitize through the finger wagging, where you're going back and forth and you're processing traumatic events, or they'll use buzzies or paddles that you can hold in your hand, where it will buzz on one side and then buzz on the other side. Some people use bilateral auditory music. Some people use a light therapy, where you follow a light, whether it goes across the screen or it'll go up and down, and you follow this light. So you're using both sides of your brain to reconnect those neural pathways that were disconnected through those traumatic events.
Yep, that's a great way to explain it, because I was, bottling it all up for years and just blamed it on one thing, when really, I thought I had all the answers.
Right.
And you know what I mean? I had my modern day problem, but I thought I had a modern day solution, which
Right.
was drink and shut up. And
Right.
I would smoke cigarettes. I lived in the attic, and it was a finished attic, so it used to be an attic, and one part of the attic was off to the side, so my parents turned that into a walk-in closet for me. But
Right.
it had a window in the walk-in closet, so I would hang out the window and smoke cigarettes. I would have a bottle hidden in there because nobody ever came up to my room.
Right.
my laundry came downstairs. My mom never came upstairs for the laundry. She's got bad knees, so she wasn't dealing with my steps. So, I could hide stuff in my room without worrying about getting caught. And I would
Right.
hide bottles of liquor, hide packs of cigarettes, Black and Milds, ashtrays, you name it. I had it hidden in that little room. And that was my escape for whatever was bothering me that day, whether it was getting bullied. Sixth grade is the grade that you start getting changed for gym.
Right.
So, I'm a bigger guy, and I was a bigger guy back then. So I was getting made fun of, for being fat and everything. So, I figured I know how to take away this pain.
Right.
These are my best friends that are, and I use quote marks for that too. These are my best friends that are treating me this way, so I must be it. These are the ones that are closest to me, and they're the ones saying it. So that has to be true.
Right. Well,
Um,
I think a lot of people don't understand is that a lot of these traumatic events that happen, like the bullying, really what it's doing is it's attacking your identity, right? So when a part of our identity is stripped from us and how we feel about ourselves, it just intensifies all of those emotions.
yeah,
So
no, I
totally.
couldn't agree more. Now, what kind of family did you grow up with? Were you have any brothers or sisters?
Yeah, I actually have 9 brothers. They're all
Yeah.
from dads and moms and foster families, but ultimately I have 9 brothers and 1 foster sister. So
Wow, 9 brothers.
yeah.
Where do you fall on that ladder? Middle, end, beginning?
Well, I probably would be more in the middle lower end. However, so I would be like number 4 in my brain with all of my brothers. I grew up the oldest in my family where I was raised with my 2 younger brothers. So
Oh, okay. All right. So you're right in the middle. Now, your parents obviously they didn't stay together long.
well, my mom was murdered when I was 7 years old. So when you talk about that, blaming your alcoholism on death, not knowing the real root of the pain, I did that for many years too. So she was murdered when I was 7 years old.
Can we talk about that? Like what happened?
Sure. Yeah. So I think there was a time when she was raped by her brother after a night of drinking. Her and my dad that raised me. I remember they packed us in the car one night. It was a winter night. It must have been around Christmas time because I remember uh, a tree being like destroyed, a Christmas tree being destroyed. Um, and that could be another memory, but I remember being packed in the car and it was wintertime and we were parked outside my uncle's house. And at the time, I was always very worried about my mom dropping me off because she would just dump me off so she could go and party all the time. So I was like super vigilant about where's my mom. I was 6 years old at the time, and I followed them into the apartment building. And I opened the door and had seen my uncle uh, holding a US flag in front of him to protect himself. And then I think I saw my uncle kill my other uncle. Um, my my dad actually took the rap for it, but my dad always said it was my mom that killed him. But in my mind, in my little kid mind, in my memories, it was another uncle that had killed him.
So the uncle that raped your mom was killed by your other uncle.
Yeah. So my uncle that was killed by my mom was her biological brother, her full brother. They must have been about 23 and 25 years old at the time. And then the uncle that I believed killed her was my dad's brother.
Oh, okay. All right. Not that I'm justifying any of this, but I'm just trying to make sense of it in my head. All
Yeah.
right. So your dad took the blame for your mom's brothers dying.
Yes. Yes. He
And
He took the blame and ended up going to prison, I think, for a year for mitigated homicide. Or
Mitigated.
it was one of the lowest levels of homicide because he went to jail for a year. So
Okay, and
murder or something. So
your mom was there, and your dad's brother was there too.
in my brain, I believe that, but over the conversations over the years, it was not, he was not there.
Okay, and your dad did it because of what happened with him and your mom.
Yes. Yes.
Because it happened, and then your mom told your dad, hey, blah 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 did this to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And it did happen. My little brother saw it. And my dad had a couple of cousins that were there that night that were partying. It was at our house. I think my dad had passed out or something. They had been drinking all night long. And so yeah, it was confirmed it did happen.
And so who murdered your mom?
We never really knew. I did have a cousin that let me know that it quite possibly was a pimp at that time. So, but we were in foster care. So about 6 months later, during that time when my dad went to prison, I remember being in a couple of different apartments and being homeless at times, just staying with random men. My mom was always the one that my dad really took care of us, but he was the breadwinner, right? And she rarely worked. I think I remember her one time trying to work as a certified nurse's assistant, but she fell downhill fairly quickly. And I remember she gave me and my little brother Tom a shower, and she put us in new clothes. I was about 6 years old, and my little brother was 5, and she told us we had to leave. She kicked us out. And I remember walking downtown, and this strange Indian woman came and picked us up. She knew who we were. We didn't know who she was, and she kept us. It felt like forever, but I think it was only maybe a couple of weeks to maybe a month. And then we ended up in foster care. And about a couple months later, I remember my mom had gone to treatment, and my baby brother at the time, he was still in diapers, maybe a year and a half, 2 years old. He came to the foster family with us also. My mom went to treatment, and I guess she tried to get us back. Within a month of her being out of treatment, she was hooked up with a pimp and probably doing things that I never really wanted to believe. So
Yeah, it's hard being, as you know, being in addiction and trying to find ways and means to get more.
right.
And you kind of feel like your back's up against the wall at all times, but then that wall keeps falling back and you keep falling back into that wall. So it's never an easy thing to try to justify why your mom isn't here anymore.
Right.
You're never going to find an answer. It's going to be like, oh, okay. There's never going to be that resolution to where it's all going to be okay again. And I feel that way about my first fiance that committed suicide. I never found out the details of how she did it, and I chose not to hear those details because it wasn't ever going to make it so acceptable. Like be like, okay, well that makes sense then. Okay, as long as I know that now I have peace. That's not going to bring me any kind of peace of mind.
Right. Right. It can re-traumatize you to a certain extent, knowing all details. So I understand learning or having to protect yourself in that situation.
Yeah, I definitely would agree with you on that. Wow, okay, that's a whole lot of trauma. When your dad got out, were you able to go back with your dad?
At the time, it was in the early 80s, right? So it definitely wasn't a time where you could just, get your kids back as a man. They put him through a lot of stuff. He had been drinking, but he did everything that he could in order to get us back. There's a law called the Indian Child Welfare Act. And because I wasn't his biological daughter, we had family members that were fighting to get us in the courts. He ultimately was able to get us, but we were in foster care, I want to say about 3 years at that time. So yes,
So
we talked to our dad.
now, because you're the first Native American that I've had on the show, how
Mhm.
much percent are you?
I am 7/16 Crow Indian. Abzalake is what we say.
Oh, okay. All right. And all from around that area of Montana?
Yes, the Crow Reservation is about 2.2 million acres, about 30 miles south of Billings, Montana.
Okay. All right. You only just reminded me because you said that law. Did you eventually get back to go to your dad?
Yes, we did. I must have been about 10 years old. We were able to go back to our dad. I think we were with him about a year or two, probably about 2 years, and then he lost us again to CPS.
What was that like for you? Because now you're an older and now you're being this wasn't your biological dad?
No, but he raised me since I was 6 months old, so he's my dad, and
Yeah.
I'm always his daughter. So
Yeah.
I think it was okay because to a certain extent, I wanted to feel safe, right? My dad was drinking a lot. It was kind of scary from time to time when, I never felt unsafe with any of my uncles or cousins or anybody that was over, but they were drinking every day. Um, I really yearned for a female connection when I was about that age. And my foster mom, she had a sister that would come and pick me up from time to time and take me to her house for like the weekend. And so she picked me up for the weekend one time and came back, and my little brothers had been there by themselves all weekend long. So, and that's how he lost us again. So
Where did you go this time?
this time I went to another Native American woman that lived maybe about 6 blocks away from my dad's house. I always call her my Aunt Jill. Um, and she pretty much taught me how to be Indian, I guess you could say. She was also really big into AA and had been sober for about 10 years. She was really strict, taught me how to be responsible and how to clean up after myself and keep the house clean. She was very strict. I hated her. But to this day, I really respect what she did for me.
I was gonna say, yeah, she's just trying to teach you basic necessities.
Yeah.
It's the basic things that you learn when you go to rehab is how to take care of yourself again.
Right.
And I think that you were never given that role model of, what this is supposed to be like. And all this, you're used to being around chaos.
Well, my dad was a really good housekeeper and a really good cook. I don't remember our house ever being dirty. I don't ever remember not having clean clothes. We didn't have a whole lot. Nothing was really fancy, right? But he was a Marine, and he was very strict also. So he taught us a lot of like really good skills. He just was drinking a lot to numb a lot of the heartbreak and pain that he had endured throughout his lifetime. So he was self-medicating his trauma.
Yeah, because this was in the 80s.
Hmm.
So your dad was what, in the Cold War?
He was he used to always say that he went to Vietnam, but when we buried him, we found out that he didn't go to Vietnam. He was in the Marines, but it was just outside the timing of Vietnam. So he
Oh,
was
okay.
in,
Then that, okay.
yeah.
All right. So, Did you ever go back to your dad's again?
Yeah, we did. I think about a year later, we absolutely refused to be with Jill anymore, and they sent us home, and we were with him again for a couple of years until I started running away, and they just quit taking us away from my dad. So, but we definitely were not. I went and lived with my original foster mom for a year in Idaho. I stayed with friends. Was running away on a daily basis. He would call the cops on me. They would pick me up next door until the one day the police, went to my dad and said, "Hey, your daughter is next door. She's safe over there. She is not afraid. She's not doing anything. What are you doing?" And then he quit calling the cops on me, and I just drank and partied and did whatever I wanted to at that point.
Yeah, I was gonna say, when did you start running away a lot?
Mm, I must have been I went to Idaho with my foster mom, like I was talking about. And I remember her telling me one time, if you ever get drunk or you do drugs, I'm going to send you back home. It was just kind of like her way of saying, this isn't, it's not allowed here. She was trying to set boundaries and that sort of thing. I had smoked a little bit of pot here and there, maybe had a couple of beers here and there. But when I was in Idaho, I blitzed myself out, passed out, throwing up, sheriff coming to the house, checking on me. And she ended up putting me in treatment. And at that time, I was 14 years old. And at that time, I was finally given the opportunity to kind of grieve my mom. For many years, I just hated her because in my eyes, she didn't love me. She didn't care about me. I just absolutely hated her because who kicks a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old out of the house? Do you know what I mean? So I blamed a lot of my drinking and stuff on her. And at that time, I was able to kind of come to terms a little bit about her death, but I still used it for another 15 years before I actually ended up quitting.
So when did you start drinking? How old were you?
I remember when I lived with my mom, my dad had gone to prison, and I must have been about 5 years old. And I remember us drinking a beer. And I remember me and my little brother, or I was about 6 years old. I remember me and my little brother pretending like we were drunk around the house. I don't know if it was just a drink or if we were really drunk, but I remember my mom giving me a beer when I was 5. I remember in 6th grade when I had a birthday party, my uncle took me and all my friends up to the roller skating rink and he let us share a beer. I remember I must have been 8th grade is really when I started drinking, like on the weekends. We'd go to the local like teen hotspot and we'd go to Electric Avenue and dance and act like we were older and we'd drink a few beers here and there.
We
Our
would
big
live
thing,
in the woods when I was that age. We would throw parties in the woods,
yeah.
and you know that would be we would find somebody who was 21. A lot of us would stand outside the liquor store. In our
Mhm.
town, there was one liquor store, 4 bars, 1 square mile, 8,000 people, like just packed into one town.
Oh yeah.
And next door to the liquor store was a shady motel with a lot of
Mhm.
shady characters there. And they would walk always over, to the liquor store, and we would pay them like $5 to go get us, which is a lot of money back then. In the
Right.
90s, $5 can get you a 6 pack or a 12 pack. So we'd pay someone for them to buy their beer, they buy us liquor too. And
Mhm.
I remember those 8th grade weekend parties
Yeah.
because that's when I started drinking socially. I'd already been drinking on my own,
Yeah.
by myself, but this is when I started really just like drinking with a group of people, and this is fun. This is what we're supposed, you know what
Right.
I mean? So I remember those kind of parties in 8th grade on the weekends and
Right.
drunk with your friends and
It's how it starts. It's the slippery slope. I always use the Jelinek curve. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
Okay. Well, it's the progression of alcoholism or even addiction in general. It's kind of like you'll have to look it up one of these days, and it's just that slow progression and how quickly, and then all of a sudden it's out of control and you can't stop. And
Yeah.
then so the upward is all the things that we need to do in order to um, in order to recover, which is like get your mental health on track and get your physical health on track and connect with people, go to AA, play basketball, do the things that really, build our self-esteem in order to maintain that long-term recovery. So,
No, you don't gotta tell me I am 24 hours into quitting smoking cigarettes, and I have patches. I haven't put one on yet. I'm
yeah,
trying to go as long as possible without putting a patch on.
right,
It helps me knowing that the patch is there if I need it, but
right,
I'm trying to go without it because I don't either way I'm gonna have to come off the patches eventually too.
right.
So, and this one day is the longest I've had since 2006 when
Right.
I quit for 1 week.
Oh,
And before that, I started smoking when I was 13. So
yeah.
I was 13 in 1999.
Yeah.
So, I've been smoking 25 years and it came to that time of, okay, I have to stop smoking.
Right. Right. I started smoking when I was 12 years old. There used to be little coupons in the Sunday newspaper, and we would clip those out and go down to the convenience store, and we would forge these fake notes, and they would give us cigarettes. They would just kind of giggle at us, and just like what you said, it in the 80s when I was growing up, it was like people didn't care if you gave them $10, they would buy for you, and there was no law about this. It was kind of sorry, I'm getting phone calls, um but yeah, you'll have to watch yourself when you start withdrawing from it. It's going to feel like you have the flu. um I quit last year for about 6 months, and it was the worst withdrawal I had ever had in my entire life. It was like a constant headache and constant body aches. So
Yep. I got the body aches already. It's
right.
it's not the first thing I've quit cold turkey. I quit opiates cold turkey. I quit benzos and weed cold turkey. I
Oh,
quit alcohol cold turkey. So I've put myself in positions to where I've hurt. You know what I mean? Like
right.
when I quit alcohol, I wasn't a daily drinker anymore though. So that's why I felt like I could come off alcohol without worrying about seizures.
Right.
Um, benzos I had been using for 9 months daily, but for 9 months and I was clean from benzos for 5 years
Yeah.
before those 9 months. So I had some time in between. It was a slow progression
Right.
from Ativan to Valium and to how many Valium I was doing. It was a slow progression.
Right.
So I stopped them and I quit opiates. They offered me what's it called? They offered me Bupe. What the hell is it called? I'm blanking on the name. What do they give to opiate addicts? I can't even forgetting the name.
Suboxone or methadone,
What was the other one?
Suboxone.
Suboxone. Thank you. I don't know why I
Oh,
was blanking on that name.
yeah.
Yeah, they were offering me Suboxone when I went to rehab, and that was 6.5 years ago, and I turned it down. And they said, "Why?" And I said, "Because I want to remember how bad this hurt, so I don't want to come back again."
Right.
And and it worked.
Right.
And I think it's some of it's mind over matter of like I want to be done, not I need to be done. I'm not quitting for anybody else but myself, and that helps a lot too.
Right.
But yeah, these withdrawals are gonna suck,
Right.
but it's a lot better than long term smoking. I'm
Right.
38 years old. I have good lungs, and I might as well preserve them and not make them turn black.
Right.
Um, so you started young like I did when it came to drinking and using.
Right. Right. I think most of us do.
You'd be surprised. I've talked to a bunch of people that they're like late bloomers. They start, drinking and they turn 21
Hmm.
and it just goes downhill really fast for them.
Right.
And I've done 250 episodes on my other show, and there's been a lot of people that I call late bloomers,
Hmm.
and they weren't drinkers in high school. They were, on the honor roll and went to college. Some even finished college before they started drinking. And I'm just like, how? How did you get through high school without a drink? I couldn't even get through middle school without a drink, junior high without a drink. I don't know. Um, and what was it like going to high school then when you were bouncing all around?
Um, I went to high school here in Billings, and then I went to Idaho for the year. I think after my it was very, I don't know how to get that thing to stop, but it was very hard because I was drinking, and I was struggling with my well, I wouldn't say mental health, but I was pretty depressed and just kind of felt like I was kind of like failing at life. So it was hard to stay focused, and I was really um having to go to high school was very boring. It was irritating. I didn't like the people. I was always getting into fights, and I had a boyfriend that was cheating on me with all the girls, and it just was. So I ended up quitting by my junior year. Um, I think at the time I got my GED a year ahead of my senior class. So
Yeah, so you dropped out and got your diploma quicker by that because you were intelligent enough to get your diploma. It just you didn't want to put up with the politics of dealing with school.
it just was not for me. For many years, I had dreams that I had to finish high school. Even when I was in college, I would dream that I needed to finish high school. And I don't think I quit having those dreams until I was in my master's program. So
Did you go to college right away?
I had kids when I was 17 and 18 years old. And I had a teacher when I was a kid or a principal that told me that I was smart enough to do anything, right? She put me in the gifted and talented education class because I have a pretty high IQ. And I believed her. She spoke life into me, and I freaking believed her. So I made the decision at a very young age that I was going to go to college. I always thought I was going to be a nurse or a teacher or something. And um, so I remember when my kids were about 2, 3 years old, I drove past a daycare um, at not the local college, but in Bozeman, MSU. I drove by the daycare, and I made the decision at that point that I was going to go to college when my girls were in school full time. So when my daughter was in first grade and um, second grade, when they were both old enough to be in school full time. Sorry, I had to put my charger on. Um, when they were both in school full time, I decided I was going to go to school. So in '99, I started my college career.
And what was your main study then?
At the time, it was nursing until I realized I sucked at science. I understand it, can't test in it. So I was working at the psychiatric ward and was working with kids, and decided I wanted to be a counselor. So I changed my major and started working with kids, gosh, in 2003.
Now, did your drinking spill out into using it all from like your party in high school, or were you able to keep that under wraps after becoming a mom?
Um, it probably wasn't the healthiest. I thought it was okay. I thought I was managing fine. Um, Before I went to college, I was a bartender at our local, um, it's kind of a nice restaurant and bar. It caters to like doctors and lawyers and all of that. So because I was working at a high class bar, I always thought it was going to be okay. But I never realized until my end of my bartending career that I was ruining lives just the same as the people that were in the homeless bars or the kind of like shady bars that my dad and mom and everybody hung out in.
So you had it in your mind that you weren't going to be another one on the stool basically and drinking.
Well, it kind of was. I was partying from time to time on the weekends, probably every Friday and Saturday night. And then it got to a point where I would have a couple of beers after I put my girls to bed just to relax. And because I was working full time, going to school full time, taking care of kids, it was a lot of stress. And I hadn't healed from any of that trauma that I had lived, that I had dealt with as a kid. So.
And were you married?
At the time, no. I had boyfriends that were kind of serious, I guess you could say. Probably not as serious as I thought that they were. I was in love, obviously, but I don't think it was that way for the guys I was with at the time either. So
that's a whole lot of trauma though still to get through.
Right.
And how do you think that you live with it today?
Well, so I had broken up with one of the boyfriends had broken up with me. And I was pretty heartbroken. Usually I was the person that did the breaking up, right? I was the one in control. He had gotten me to the point where he would pay my bills, and I accepted that he was paying my bills. So I almost got dependent on him financially. And then he just like cut me off cold turkey, and it like stripped a part of my identity that I would never let go before that. So I was pretty heartbroken for a couple of years, drank a lot, probably was drinking on a daily basis. And then all of a sudden I started getting DUI after DUI after DUI. I was losing apartments. I was on the verge of losing my job. And I just had to quit or I was going to lose my freedom and my kids. So I had lost like 4 cars in 1 year, spent like $25,000 on legal fees and vehicles. And it was I was a hot mess for a minute. And then I pretty much just cried out to God and asked for help, and I need to stop. And I had tried a few times that year. But ultimately it wasn't until it was like my freedom was going to get stripped from me and I was going to end up in prison.
Did do you excuse me, that's a cigarette, a smoker cough. I got now, so you're still sober today?
I am.
What's your sober date?
October 18th, 2004.
Okay, so you just celebrated 20 years.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Congratulations. That is a nice number to have. Do you work a program at all?
I went to church. I never went to treatment. I lied in all of my assessments. I did the minimal amount of treatment that I possibly could do. But I ultimately, I had to have that spiritual experience, right? I had that aunt that had introduced me to AA, and I just didn't have a good experience with AA. It took her away from us, and it took her, I was always babysitting for her. So I didn't have a good experience with AA, but I went to church and I ended up being in church, gosh, sometimes 3, 4, 5, 6 days out of the week, whether it was like Monday night prayer or Tuesday night women's Bible study and Wednesday night regular Bible and Thursday night youth group and Friday night. I used to babysit for Celebrate Recovery on Saturday nights, and then regular church on Sunday. And so, and I never realized throughout the process that I was going through all of the steps that you go through in AA, right? So
yeah, you're finding the connection to your higher power. You're being of service and taking on service commitments, like taking care of babysitting the kids while Celebrate Recovery is happening. I went to AA. I worked the steps in AA. I now go to NA, and I'm working the steps in NA. I also do GA, so I'm very familiar with 12-step
Right.
program.
Right.
I've been, my recovery date is April 25th, 2018, and that's when I got clean from opiates. I've relapsed on different, benzos and weed and alcohol throughout the years. But I still always remember what I learned in recovery 7 years ago. So when I had my relapses, I knew what I needed to do, which was get back into my program work, take commitments, be of service, the kind of things that you're describing that you were doing for your church.
Right. Right. So that relapse is kind of part of the stages of change, right? It's part of the process. It's not something that we really want. I think about 5-6 years in, I had a night of, an afternoon of 4 shots and a few beers and was home, passed out, puking. Next morning, popped up, started doing a Bible study, started fasting, did a 40-day fast and popped right up. And I am very thankful for that relapse because it reminded me this is not the life I want for myself. I don't want to wake up like this anymore. So to me, the relapse is a blessing, and it doesn't take my 20 years away, actually. So in my eyes, anyway. It's not the rules or the laws of NA or AA or GA, but
no, I call that a lapse.
Right.
So what is Ginger Goes Ahead?
So Goes Ahead, we have Native American names. My husband's last name is Goes Ahead. His great grandfather Goes Ahead Pretty was his Indian name, or his name. My family name is Old Crane. But it originally goes through our Indian names, is how our government name is what we call it. How it comes to us now. We do have Indian names. I was given an Indian name from one of my clan aunts. She was going to get a master's degree in Christian studies. And she was in Michigan, I believe, on Lake Michigan in Chicago, going to college. And she would pray on the banks of the water. She left her grandchildren, so she would be praying for her grandchildren all the time. So that's what she named me. It's Benaskin Chuwagish. It means praise on the banks of the water. So
that's a pretty name.
Yeah, it is. That's pretty cool.
Well, I appreciate you coming on here, Ginger, and telling your story and being where you're at today. I think it shows you, it doesn't matter where you came from, you can change a narrative. And, now you're helping the community out with people who are dealing with addiction, which addiction isn't pretty these days when it comes to the fentanyl that's being spreading around and the xylazine. Is xylazine out in Montana yet?
I think I work with our police department, and I think there was a couple of cases within the last 6 months. But I went for a training out with the police department out in Boston, and you would just drive down the street and people were like doubled over and kind of like zombied out. And it was pretty shocking. So when I saw it here in Billings, I saw this lady like doubled over, like asleep, just standing there, and I knew it had hit our town. It's not huge or prevalent yet, but it's coming. We know it's coming.
Yeah, I'm from South Jersey, right outside of Philadelphia. I grew up 15-20 minutes from Kensington, and Kensington's one of the biggest xylazine in the entire country.
Right.
And it's so messed up that people are saying that, like, how if you're a heroin addict and you stop doing heroin, you do some heroin, you're going to feel right again. It's called getting right. And, if you were a fentanyl addict and you do some fentanyl, you're going to get right again and not be in pain. If you get xylazine and you run out of xylazine and you try doing fentanyl, you're still in withdrawal.
Yeah.
You have to continue to do xylazine because you're putting horse tranquilizer into your body.
Right.
And it's eating away at people's skin. And I've had a couple people on the show that, you know, were addicted to xylazine.
Yeah.
And the one girl almost lost her entire arm when she could see the bone and the tendons in her arm
Oh my gosh.
because of how much, you know, it was eating away at her skin.
Scary.
So, yeah, hopefully it sticks away from you guys for as long as possible. But, you know, the drugs are coming west and it's unfortunate.
Yeah, it really is. It's scary. I'm trying to stay away from that right now in my brain, but I mean, ultimately, I know we've all been talking about we're gonna have to get like up to speed with what's going on with xylazine and all of that, but we're still pretty well in the dark over here. But
yeah, well, keep doing what you're doing, Ginger. I appreciate what you're doing.
right. Well, thank you very much.
Not a problem. Have a good night.
Yep, you too.